Okay, my aunt Lisa.
Okay, my aunt.
Alton Alton from White Plains.
Greetings from out here, young blood. Who's that? Mark Norris Sr. Uncle Mark. ET in the top.
YouTube is quiet so far, but we'll give them a minute. They'll catch up with y'all on Facebook.
Reaching out to Basil. Judy Rob's in the house.
Alton Alton, Cheryl. There's still no movement on YouTube. I don't know what's happening, right? Like, y'all don't get to be here. We should just be here with Facebook today.
Bunham in the house. Uncle my aunt.
Alton Alton, Charity. Uncle my aunt, YouTube. Now I see y'all getting logged in. Getting in the house. That's what's up. Good, good.
We're going to give it about a minute, then we're going to keep it moving. Early is on time is late.
Yes. Doing that too. Alton Alton, Wabet.
Uncle Ma'at, Anik is in the house. Shrine of Ma'at in the house.
What's Shrine of Ma'at? Alton Alton, Queen Medina.
Okay, Charity, I guess you can email us.
She can email us, or she could send us a Facebook message. Like send us a private Facebook message. Or you can email us, templeofanu@gmail.com, okay?
Okay, we'll just get started. I'll just start off by saying, Yiti Imatep. Welcome to the Crook and Flail, where we come giving you the ancient and divine wisdom of our ancestors, the guidance of our ancestors, but with modern application. In the spirit of Smai Tawi, which is unity, and the vision of Saruj Tawi, which is the spirit of the restoration of our traditions. We are your hosts. She is
Hemet Netter and Bar Ma'at, High Priestess of the Temple of Anu.
And I'm the Nasut Biddy Rasanku Kepler, Chief and Head Priest of the Temple of Anu. And we want to say Yiti and Latep and Ankin Ma'at to the first family, which is the Temple of Anu. And we also say Ankin Ma'at to the righteous and respectful chat. So We're gonna get into some roll call. So let's do the roll call so we move on.
Yeah, so I know I saw South Jersey in the house on YouTube. I know I saw White Plains, New York is in the building on Facebook. So where is everybody chiming in from? Like, let's get it popping. Got New Jersey in the building. That's what's up.
New Jersey.
A New Jersey. Do our answer. We got the DMV in the building. Shout out. Yeah.
We're slow on the roll call today.
Yeah.
They be like, we here, man. We here.
They just they're just hanging out with us.
Irvington in the house.
Yes.
That's right.
Is that Wisconsin? Wausau, Wisconsin? That's what's up. Okay. Got the Lower East Side, NYC, Orange in the building. That's what's up. Okay. All right. The righteous and respectable chat is quiet today.
This man Sarah, Erica Sarian.
All right. Yeah, so let's move into our topic for the day, or several topics for the day. So first off, let me start. I want to start by acknowledging today is Father's Day. So I want to start by wishing my father a happy Father's Day. Uncle Ma'at from London on YouTube. That's what's up. From across the pond. I want to wish my father a happy Father's Day. You know, my father always pushed me to have really high and exceptional standards for myself and for the people who I love. He held really high standards for all of us. He used to always tell us that it was our charge to go to school, learn something, and be somebody. And that's just something that I strive to embody every day. Just make sure that I am being somebody, being someone of value, being someone of worth, being someone of excellence, being someone of righteousness, being someone of ma'at. So I honor my father and the lessons that he taught me today. I want to honor the Sibidi Rasan Kukeper, who is the father of the Temple of Anu. Our temple exists because of his vision, because of his drive, because of his dedication and his determination. He probably would have had good cause to give up on us quite a few times, but he never has. He has never given up on any of us. He believes deeply not only in us, but in this great legacy, in the Netru of our ancestors, and in this culture that can empower and strengthen the unity of Black people all across the globe. And he gives himself entirely to that vision and to that mission, allowing himself to be a vessel for the power of the Netru day in and day out. And so happy Father's Day to the father of the Temple of Anu. Happy Father's Day to the father of the Kemetic legacy, Baba Haruan Kra Samaj Se Pata, without whom none of us would be doing this work, because he was among the first to be bold and have the audacity and the brilliance to live this culture and to walk this walk. And he showed us what it means to be unapologetically Kemetic. And he shows us every single day what it means to live and act upon that which we know to be true, to our highest reality. He is an example for all of us. He has only gotten better with age, and his strength and his courage is so meaningful and so important for all of us. Happy Father's Day to the other fathers, the shrine fathers, such as Hemneter Heru Jedin Ma'atatin Ra, and Infidisi Jehudimus Hassan Kamal Salim, and the other fathers of other temples and shrines around the country. And shout out to the fathers of the Temple of Anu, Sir Shep Armin Kau, Wa Mentu Ra, Wa Majudi Ra, Soniket, Sir Shep Sorry, not Soshub. Sesh Nasus and Jetty Ankra. Shout out to Kev Fresh. Did I name all the fathers? Min Sarah, Hemnetta Min Sarah. Shout out to all the fathers of the Temple of Anu. And, you know, just the excellent work that you continue to do, to be present, to be a good example to your sons and your daughters, to be loving and supportive, and protecting influences in the lives of your wives and in the women around you. I want to just lastly
give condolences to Min Sarah's
Two, and we uplift Min Sarah at this time, as he sends his father to the west. And we know that your father, Min Sarah, is becoming a great and glorious ancestor who will do great and beautiful things for you and for your family, now that he has joined the ranks of the beloved ones. And we send you energy, and we send your father energy, as he makes this transition at this time. Same with Hemnetta Harujaddin, who also recently lost his father, or whose father recently transitioned, to the west, and who has joined the ranks of our beloved and great ancestors. Thank you also to for the reminder. I did leave out our elder Ranu, but shout out to Ranu. Happy Father's Day, Ranu. Happy Grandfather's Day, Ranu. Yes. And lastly, but certainly not least, I want to just acknowledge the fathers in the righteous and respectable chat, and our supporters and friends who are fathers, who some of you I know by name and some of you I do not know by name. But, you know, I just want to acknowledge how amazing it is for us to be parents and for us to have such amazing examples of fatherhood and manhood in this legacy and in this culture. You know, many of us, too many of us, grew up without the right examples of fatherhood and manhood in our lives. We didn't have fathers. We didn't have good relationships with our fathers. Our fathers were not necessarily good men. And so many of the brothers that I know made a decision, a conscious and purposeful decision, to be better than the men that they knew, be better than that, and to demonstrate better than that. And they spend every waking moment striving to be excellent and striving to give their children something that their parents didn't give them, their father didn't give them, striving to overcome all the negative stereotypes about Black fathers that exist out there in the world, striving to show that those things are not true, striving to redeem the name of Black fatherhood, and striving to redeem Black manhood through their own example and through their own actions. And that is what it looks like for us to redeem our lineages and to heal our lineage and to heal ourselves for the sake and the benefit of our descendants and for generations to come. And I'm so grateful for the men who are committed to this legacy and committed to this walk as the means of using these teachings, using the Netru, working with the Netru, and using, you know, our ancestral magic and spiritual principles to empower themselves and to make themselves into examples of divinity walking upon the earth. And so I'm so grateful to be able to look upon you and see your greatness and see your divinity, and I honor it and respect it and acknowledge it today. Dua Neter.
I'm in my heart to that.
So we got a lot of Happy Father's Day in the chat. So I know we had a number of things to talk about today. We wanted to talk about, yesterday was the summer solstice, so we could talk a little bit about that. Friday was Juneteenth. We'll talk a little bit about that. And today is the new moon in Cancer. We might even talk a little bit about that. And we're going to talk about the first time Kemet class too. We're going to talk about that. I guess I'll start with the class then. Yeah, so dua to all of you who registered so far. We have such a good, like a really big group already registered. And we're really excited. We're going to get started real soon. So we're starting the class on July 3rd. So those of you who haven't registered, you got a little window of time where you can still jump in if you're still interested. Feel free to reach out to us whether it be in private messenger or by email, to ask questions. We did post a link to the recording of the last orientation on Facebook, so feel free to listen to that orientation. It'll give you some answers and some insight into what the course is about and what you can expect to learn as you make your decision about whether or not you're going to join us on this cycle. So again, you guys have a small window to jump in the class if you still have not yet registered. And then the next time that we offer the course may be closer to, if not all the way in 2021. So it'll be a little while before we have the next class. So anybody who thinks they're ready now, we want to try to make sure you guys get in here now. And for those of you who maybe are not ready yet but have some questions or want to talk about it, feel free to reach out to us with your questions and reach out to discuss, okay? Yeah. So I guess we'll segue into talking about Juneteenth a little bit.
You want to get with the solstice first? Somebody said something about the eclipse.
Yeah. I mean, so... yeah, I guess I could talk about that a little bit. So I'll talk about the summer solstice, the new moon, and the new moon eclipse, the solar eclipse that was all happening in the last 24 hours. Oh, Uncle how do we miss you too, baby? Okay, so we had all of that happen in the last 24 hours. The summer solstice is a really important and significant holiday to us in the Temple of Anu because the summer solstice honors Ra, and Ra is the high nectar that governs our temple. That is the nectar that we honor as central to our temple and to our theology. And for me, I always see the summer solstice as an opportunity to acknowledge like our victory and our continual motivation and striving forward to do the great work that we are doing and to continue to accomplish great things. Because what happens from the summer solstice into the fall equinox is that the energy does start to decline, but because of that height of power, that burst of solar energy that you get at the summer solstice, you feel this fire, right? You feel this fiery like push to keep going and to keep moving you and to keep driving you towards your goals. And so if you've used that summer solstice push the way you should, it's going to take everything that you started, all the seeds that you've planted in the way of accomplishing your goals, it's going to give you that extra burst of energy to finally make it through the finish line. So when you get to that fall equinox in September, you have a harvest, you have a success story, you have a realization and an actualization of the work that you've been doing over the last 6 months or so, right? So this summer solstice is such a big period for us to just push, like to push through, quite frankly. And the new moon happening right at the same time as the summer solstice is just a good opportunity for us to renew our commitment to our goals and renew our commitment to our divine work, because the new moon is all about new beginnings. But we remember that every new moon, like you don't necessarily set a new goal at every new moon. You have like a big goal that you're trying to accomplish every year, and then at every new moon every month you set a smaller goal that pushes you closer and closer to the realization of your big goal, right? So this new moon is like allowing us to reset and recharge and re-push and re-drive ourselves. That Cancer energy helps us to get back in touch with our emotions. Like, what's the reason why you set this goal in the first place? Why is this so important to you? Why is this meaningful to you? Why does this matter? What is your reason? What is your motivation? Getting into that emotions and allowing those emotions and those feelings to drive you and to push you. So it's that combination of that emotions, that water energy from your emotions, that cardinal water energy of Cancer, and that fiery push and motivation, that fire in your belly from the summer solstice that's coming from Ra and from that Haru force. Both of those things together are just making it impossible. Like, anybody who's feeling stagnant right now, I can't even see how you can be feeling stagnant right now. Like, there's the energy in the cosmos is pushing us to do things. It's pushing us to be active. It's pushing us to make decisions. It's pushing us to make changes. It's pushing us to move, right? And when you're being pushed like this, you can't Like, if you don't take advantage of it, you'll look back in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years, and you'll wish you had taken advantage of this moment, right? Because again, the energy in the universe is cyclical. So what's happening now, the fruit of which will come forth in the future. So whatever we do right now, we'll realize the fruit of that in the future. Whatever we don't do right now, we will not be able to realize the fruit of that in the future. So don't take for granted the cycle that we have right now. If you didn't do your ritual work yesterday, do it today, do it tomorrow. Get that ritual energy in. Make sure that you take advantage and tap into that energy, because it's swirling all around you. It's swirling within you, and our charge as spiritual metaphysicians is to use that energy and to use that charge to propel us forward, right, at this moment in time. Okay, all the planets in retrograde, I'm not even gonna go through the full list. I'm not even sure I know the full list. I know Venus is in retrograde, I know Mercury is in retrograde, but remember, I think Pluto's also in retrograde. Remember, retrograde planets remind us to review, to reassess, to reconsider, to rethink. They give us an opportunity to remind ourselves, right? So again, this is not about necessarily setting new goals or starting something new. This summer solstice, this new moon, these planets in retrograde, let's look at the goals that we've already set. Where have we failed to move forward? Where have we fallen short? Where have we not made as much progress as we should have? Let's look at that. Let's reassess. Let's re-solidify our commitment and move ourselves forward. So this is not necessarily about, again, starting something new, planting new seeds. The new seeds you plant is like, I'm reaffirming my commitment to be my best and highest self. I'm reaffirming my commitment to realize this goal. I'm reaffirming my commitment to make this thing happen. That's what we're doing right now. That's what the energy in the cosmos is affirming and realigning ourselves with, right? And, solar eclipses in our tradition, in the Kemetic tradition, were seen as not good omens, right? Because they were seen as moments when the darkness prevailed over Ra, right? So it's actually really interesting that Ra is at the height of his power right now, but then the solar eclipse comes in, that representing that APEP energy that overtakes the sun, right? So that's the warning here, for lack of a better word. Like, are you going to allow the darkness in your life to overtake the energy and the momentum that you have? Like, you can choose to wallow in the darkness and be like, oh, things in the world right now are so bad. The protests are so bad. Racism is so bad. Police brutality is so bad. So I'm just going to throw up my hands and not do anything. You can choose to do that, right? But that's a choice. That's a choice. You don't have to do that. You can still overcome and rise above the situation, right? Because remember, that solar eclipse, that's still just a moment. APEP only wins for a moment, and then Ra still comes back to shine greater and brighter than ever. So just because something is happening to you doesn't mean that you allow that darkness to take over and to last in your lives longer than it needs to, right? Like, something is happening is a lesson. It's something for you to consider. It's something for you to learn. It's something for you to grow from. But it's not something for you to wallow in. It's not something that's supposed to stop you or to keep you from realizing your destiny and realizing your highest dreams. I saw a comment here. Wabek Kisa said, this is a major period of review and reset. It's a time for shadow work and integration. This is a time to reassess your patterns and to interrupt your patterns where necessary and realign. Exactly. That's exactly correct. Like, if you can choose to wallow, but that's a choice. You can also choose to be like, my old self would wallow in this moment and wallow in this energy. And who I am now, I'm choosing instead to overcome this. I'm choosing instead to take all these other positive things and help push me out of this darkness, to help push this darkness away from me. Instead of doing the same old things, which is like, I set a goal, but then I lose momentum on the goal and then I never finish. Instead of doing those types of things, this time, I'm going to learn from that negative pattern. I'm going to learn from that negative behavior. I'm going to learn from that, and I'm going to choose to push myself beyond that. I'm going to push myself beyond the limitations of who I used to be. That's how we grow. That's how we grow. We have to push ourselves beyond our limitations of our past. If you continue to stay who you are and stay where you are, you never become who you're meant to be, right? And so this moment right here, right now, where you have that Cancer, water, emotional energy, pushing you to remind you of what's important to you, what's your values. You have that energy of Ra motivating you and reminding you that you're capable of being excellent. You have these planets in retrograde that are asking you to remember the lessons that you've learned and remember the things that remember the things that you've gone through already and the tests that you've already endured and the lessons that have already prepared you for growth. So all you have to do is choose to grow. All you have to do is choose to move. All you have to do is choose to make progress and to choose to go forward. And so to not do that at this time would be to prepare yourself and set yourself up for stagnation. It would be to prepare yourself up to be the same person today that you've always been. And again, as we are people who are striving to realize our highest reality, to be divine beings in the flesh, we cannot continue to be and do who it is that we were in the past, right? Like who we was in the past, I don't know who you was. I know who I was in the past. I don't want to be who I was in the past. I want to realize what is the next level of my evolution. I want to level up. I want to become better. I want to shine brighter. I want to do bigger things. So that's the energy that we have right now, is the opportunity to make the decision that that's what we want to do, and to figure out what did I do before that kept me from leveling up, and how do I stop doing that and start doing new things and instituting new patterns and instituting new behaviors that's going to help me level up, right? So so that's what's going on in the cosmos right now. It's so powerful. It's so powerful. I personally feel like the electricity in the air. I don't feel like we should be wasting this opportunity. I really don't. And I know that we are in the midst of eclipse season. So we have another eclipse coming up in a couple of weeks. So we have another even more opportunity to again use the energy of right now to propel us forward. Whatever we do right now is gonna manifest for us or mean something for us in 6 months, in a year. Whatever we don't do right now, we'll know in 6 months, in a year, we'll be able to tell we didn't use this moment the way we should have. Okay. And also there's another new moon in Cancer coming up. This year has 2 new moons in Cancer. So the second one is in July. All right. So another opportunity again to use that cardinal water energy to our advantage. And we'll talk more about that when we get there. But I just wanted to acknowledge the importance of this energy in the here and now. This is so significant to us. And again, those of us in the Temple of Anu, members of the Temple of Anu, initiates of the Temple of Anu, do your Ra work. Honor Ra this weekend. Ra is the father of our house. For many of us, Ra is our spiritual father. Ra is my spiritual father. So we have to do our Ra work. And Ra for us is about our ability to manifest excellence, to strive to be at the height of our power, to understand our ability to create, to understand our ability to be divine, to generate from ourselves. Ra is the self-created one. Ra is the self-generating one. The beings come forth from his being. So what are you bringing forth from your being? What greatness, what divinity, what amazing things are being brought forth from your being? That's the Ra energy that we have to capitalize on and connect to. That's what Ra is pushing us to do and to be. Ra doesn't want us to be good. Ra wants us to be great. And Ra doesn't want us to be great. Ra wants us to be excellent. And Ra doesn't want us to be excellent. Ra wants us to be divine. So whatever level we're on, we always can do better. We always can get further. And we always have more work to do.
True. Okay.
I see comment on YouTube. Phoenix, the Banu bird in the Kemetic tradition, is reborn from the ashes. While we are not the same fire bird, the remnants of our past that held something worth continuing. Rebirth the Sankofa into a new flame. Duanetter. Yes. All right. 2, but this is an exciting time to be alive. Absolutely. And I mean, not for nothing, I'll also say that this is probably why the protests and so much activity is going on as it relates to Juneteenth. So let me just use this to segue into Juneteenth, because we talked about the retrogrades and how retrogrades cause us to reassess, right, and to remind ourselves and to relook at things. And some of us feel like this situation that we're in now is the same situation that we were in a few years ago, as far as being out in the streets, chanting Black Lives Matter, protesting the system, protesting police brutality. But there was something different then than there is now. And I think one of the main things that I see that I'm super excited about is I see, the protesters, and I see people who are focused on enacting real and meaningful and lasting change, right? And so you have the difference between like a lot of companies that are doing these like superficial things, like they're putting out statements like, we support Black Lives Matter and we'll let y'all have off of work for Juneteenth, right? Which is real superficial. It's cool, like, don't get me wrong, my company gave me off for Juneteenth, I took off for Juneteenth, but that's not the goal that we really have in mind, right? Like, when it comes down to the work that's being done in this movement, you can't stop fighting just because the cops got arrested. You can't stop fighting just because people started wearing Black Lives Matter's slogan t-shirts at Starbucks. You can't stop fighting just because people get off of work for Juneteenth. Like that's not the end to the problem. And so again, we're now like reassessing, like, what do we want and how do we get it? And where are we going from here? And taking a hard stance to say, you know what? No, like, I'm not willing to settle for like your meaningless gestures of support of Blackness, right? Like, we want the institutions to change radically and fundamentally in order that we as Black people will be honored, respected on this planet Earth, that we will have the rights that should be afforded to us and should have been afforded to us this whole time, and we will not settle for anything less, right? So the protests have to continue. Yes, we celebrated Juneteenth, that's amazing, but the protests have to continue, because the protest is not just about like making sure people tell us that they honor Black lives. The protests are about making sure that the laws and the ways that police act in our communities and the way that our communities run themselves economically, that the structures honor Black lives and the structures reinforce that Black lives matter. So we can't settle for the superficial. We have to push to make sure that the structures reinforce this, right? And that's going to require continued work on our behalf to reinforce that. And I'm really excited. Like I said, I see a lot of people saying that online, saying that on Facebook, on Instagram, that they know that we can't just settle for the support from Target or whatever. We can't just settle for like a Google Doodle on the Google homepage. We can't just settle for like the cute Facebook backgrounds with the black fists. Like, that's cute. But it has to be more than that, right? It has to be more than that. We have to change the institutions. We have to see an institutional change. I'll share a story with you guys that I was talking to Nasit about earlier this week. We had a town hall meeting at my company, and the CEO is not always there because it's a very large company that he is CEO over, and so he doesn't always come to like our division's town calls. But this week he came to our division's town hall, and all the questions are anonymous, so someone submitted an anonymous question that said, why haven't you released a statement personally? Like, why haven't you, CEO, released a personal statement that says Black Lives Matter? And he got frustrated. He got like visibly frustrated. And he said, I thought I said that already. He said, 5 years ago, when I told you guys that it was imperative that we increase diversity in our company, and I hired people specifically with the goal of hiring more diverse employees and bringing in more diversity in interns and bringing in more diversity and working with diverse colleges and diverse universities to recruit more at the entry level, a more diverse set of employees. That was me saying Black Lives Matter. He said, when I set up this structure to do this and to do that, that was me saying Black Lives Matter. And he went through a whole list of things that he's instituted or that we've instituted as a company over the last 5 years. And he's like, this is our way of saying Black Lives Matter. And he says, so just so y'all hear me say the words, Black Lives Matter. But also, I can't just say that with my mouth. He looked us in the face in the screen and said, I have to back that up with my actions, because as the CEO, I have power in this company to then reinforce that by the way that we run this company. If I say it with my mouth, it's just lip service. I have to do things that show Black Lives Matter. I have to encourage the editors to make sure that our books are diverse and that our books feature history about Black people that makes sense. I have to push our marketing team to be conscious, not to skip schools that are Black schools and to spend as much time at historically Black colleges as they spend at the PWIs, right? He said, I can't just say Black Lives Matter. I have to do works that show that Black Lives Matter, and I have to run the company in a way that demonstrates Black Lives Matter. So yes, he said, yes, Black Lives Matter. Yes, that's true. But also, I'm going to prove it by continuing to do this work, by continuing to put money behind things in the company that encourage diversity and inclusion, by continuing to emphasize the things that are important to show that Black Lives Matter. Because you know what's interesting? I work in textbook industry, for those of you who don't know. And what's interesting about the textbook industry is that in the last 5 years, we've had a lot of embarrassments. There have been textbooks. There was a textbook that was published, not by my company, no shade. There was a textbook that was published a couple years ago that referred to enslaved Africans as undocumented workers. It was like a high school textbook. It was like workers all across the South did not have documentation. And people were like, workers? You talk about enslaved. They said something. There was another part of the book that said something like, farmers went to Africa to get undocumented workers to come here for the plantations. They're like, what you mean? So you said it twice in one book. You call enslaved Africans undocumented workers, right? So there have been books like that have been published by textbook publishers in the last 5 to 10 years that have caused a great deal of embarrassment amongst the textbook field, amongst the textbook industry. One of the main reasons why these things happen is because in publishing, there's not a lot of Black people in publishing. There really just isn't. Not just at my company, at a lot of companies, the level of diversity is embarrassing. So a few years ago, we started a Diversity Inclusion Council, and we had the conversation that the number one thing we need to do is to go to Black schools and talk to those schools about publishing as a real opportunity, like a real viable opportunity for high school students, for college students, when they're thinking about what kind of career they want to go into. Because I said to them, you know, as someone of African descent, I didn't even know publishing was an option until I was a senior in college. My last year of college, somebody was like, why don't you go into publishing? And I was like, publishing? That's not a real job. You understand what I'm saying? So that was for me eye-opening. And so if I felt like that in my last year of college, I know there are hundreds, if not thousands, of other Black kids out there who don't know that this is an option for them. Hispanic kids, brown kids, kids of etc. Like the range of diversity is not there, and it needs to be there. And you have to start by telling people that this option is available to them, and we're actively recruiting them to come in, so that then they have a voice in how these textbooks are crafted, how these textbooks are made, and how these textbooks speak about them and about their history and about their backstory and about who their origin and who they are and where they come from, right? So this is work that we've been doing for years. We've recently, before this town hall happened, we had other meetings about holding editors accountable. Like, how do you hold an author accountable if an author writes something that's like not politically correct, or that demonstrates a lack of understanding about the Black community or whatever? How do you hold that author accountable, right? Because it happens sometimes. We have a lot of white authors, so how do you correct that author and tell them, like, yeah, we can't publish that, you're gonna have to change that, without, etc. So without necessarily calling them a racist, right? So we had a whole conversation around, like, how do you deal with that? How do you address that? How do you hold them accountable? How do you hold them to the fire? So this is the work that we're doing in the industry. And I'm not saying that my company is perfect. They're not perfect. They have a lot of work to do. The textbook industry as a whole has a lot of work to do. But I also was appreciative that he understood that his words was not enough, and that for us in this movement, there has to be more than just words. There has to be action. There have to be changes at the institutional level, from the ground up. Things have to be made differently in order for there to be made a difference in this country, right? Because that's what we're really looking for. We're really looking for things in this country to be different. We're looking for the way that this country treats Black people to be different, and the way that this country tells Black history to be different. So
with all that being said, would you say the protests have sparked the change?
I think the protests have sparked the beginnings of change. Yes, the protests have definitely done that. And I think, as we've discussed before, I think that the protests are just one phase of how change happens in the world, right? Like, so, yes, we have to be out there in the street. We have to make people uncomfortable. We have to make people angry. Even we have to create that energy, and that's what the protests do. It makes people uncomfortable. It disrupts things, and that purposefully makes people have to think and have to discuss it and deal with it, right? Because it's in your face. And then we also have to be in the boardrooms when decisions are made, right. And we have to make sure our voices are heard, and we have to run for elected office, and we have to form organizations or join organizations that advocate for our behalf in cities like in Newark. They got the People's Organization for Progress, etc. So how are we participating in these organizations? How are we making sure that their voices are being heard, and making sure that they're representing our causes? How do we help those organizations get in front of the right people at the right time when decisions are being made? So it's multiple tiers to how change happens.
Doing the spiritual work to make
we got to do the spiritual work.
Sure,
yes,
you got your ancestors and your deities behind you.
Exactly.
It's
levels to it. It's so many levels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so the protest is one level, and I think we have to continue the protests, because it's an essential level. Because, like I said, it's a disruption, and it makes people uncomfortable, and that makes discomfort is what forces change. No one ever changes when they're comfortable. People change because they're uncomfortable, because you're forced and you're pushed into change. If you're not forced, if you're not pushed, you will maintain the status quo forever and ever, because it's just easy to do. It's the easy thing to do. You have to make change the easy thing to do. You have to disrupt them to such extent that changing becomes the easiest thing for them to do. So if we don't do that, if we don't push and motivate that change, then that change doesn't happen. So again, everybody has a part to play, and everyone's part is going to be different. Some of us are going to be in the boardrooms, and some of us is going to be on the streets, but there is no...
Some of us are going to be at the shrine.
And some of us is going to be at the shrine, yes. And some of us is going to do all those things. Some of us going to be in the streets and then come home and go to the shrine. All of those things. But all of us have to do the work. All of us have to do the work to disrupt the institutions and to rebuild them from the ground up.
Yeah. So you took them to church and Facebook. I see they got a lot more to say on YouTube. But like you said, we have to run on all cylinders. And I think we have to fall back from the criticizing one another about who's doing more than the next person, because technically there's levels to the game, and we have to all be working on all cylinders. I feel like amongst the spiritual people, they get all the criticism and stuff, but I think, or I gotta speak for myself, I never claimed to be an activist or a nationalist or a politician, even though I have inclinations to some views about some things. But the key thing in life is you have to know your lane. You have to stay in your lane. And Another key thing is you have to define yourself before other people will.
Too.
So with that being said, I would say that what moves the average person doesn't move the spiritualist.
Yeah.
And what moves the spiritualist doesn't necessarily move the average person. And a lot of times what's important to both might not be on the same level at any given time. So with that being said, we could actually, you might see some spiritualists out there protesting and you might not. But the thing is, if we're out there, when and if you do see us, if and when you do see us, it'll be on our own terms and not following the emotional tide.
Too.
Because we have to always be concerned about this thing called the agenda.
Too.
We need to make sure we go hard for our own agenda and not have agendas fed to us to lead us into a direction that's not necessarily in our best interest.
Too.
So as spiritualists, our highest charge is Ankh and Ma'at, which is living in truth. Now, of course, none of us is perfect. We're all perfecting.
Yes.
So when spirit tells us to move, we move. When spirit tells us to sit still and be still, we be still, even in the face of contradiction, even if it contradicts our own personal views about certain things. With Ankh and Ma'at, which living in truth, which is a challenge to most people. When you're living in truth, you come with this challenge. You're often challenged with patience. Some people are like, why I can't do it now? Why not now? With living in truth, you have to build this unique connection with Source to know that all things can and will be revealed in the light of day in his own time, in his own season. So what everyone is screaming for now is they're talking about justice. They're talking about equality. So I always bring the conversation back to self-accountability. We have to ask, is there justice and equity amongst ourselves? Because as spiritualists, we understand the outside world is a reflection of what's going on inside, right? While everyone else is playing the blame game, as sincere spiritualists, we need to check ourselves first. What is the self-accountability? In our conscious community, we spent the greater part of the last decade committed to ridiculing one another and showing our disdain for what's sacred to one another. And like it or not, whether we like it or not, we've become masters of black on black crime. And we like to put that on the gangs, the black on black crimes. But we've seen it in the historic circles, the scholastic circles. We've seen it in religion, black on black banging. We've seen it in spiritualism, even with so-called putting roots and juju on one another. So we become masters at black on black crime. So what we failed to do was fail to show value for one another and was sacred for one another. And in failing to do that and failing to show that value, we've now given the world permission to devalue us. Y'all hear that? In us failing to value one another, we've given the world permission to devalue us. We have this saying, we're divine spiritual beings having a human experience. But the human experience doesn't have to be full of pain and suffering. Somebody says existence is pain and suffering. I think Buddha said that. Well, thank goodness we're not Buddhists. So yes, existence will have some measure of pain and suffering, but just enough pain and suffering to actually motivate and stimulate you to demonstrate your divinity. And you're judged by your ability to demonstrate your divinity by your capacity to establish ma'at, your capacity to establish truth. So in this sense, we're looking for checks and balances on everyone's capacity to establish justice. But before we look for justice in the outer world, remember, we're talking about the spirituality of the thing. We can never, remember, spirit precedes physical. So when we're looking for justice in the world or truth in the world, it all starts with order. Because ma'at, one of the attributes of the word ma'at is order too. So it's going to come down to fundamentally order and organization within self, within consciousness. Order and organization within the body, which manifests as health. Order and organization in harmonious relationships with your spouses, with your families. Order and organization with interrelationships. So I think you all see that it goes out in concentric circles, starting with self, starting with inside self. So I know a lot of times we get distracted and be like, yeah, we know that, but we got to get to this thing out here. But this thing out here is still a reflection of what's going on inside. So it's just time for us now more than ever to deal with the incongruencies inside our own spirit. And can we honestly say we've done that? Can we honestly say that we've checked ourselves consciously, checked ourselves with our health, checked ourselves in our relationships, checked ourselves in our organizations? Most organizations are not running on all cylinders because we're failing in our relationships. In a sense, Ma'at could be said to be relationships. Life is giving us biofeedback all the time. And what is the biofeedback telling us now? The atmosphere telling us now. Life's giving us biofeedback, and it's telling us, it's reading back to us that we become fixated on victimhood. So all we see when we're looking at the news or when we look in our neighborhoods, we're seeing victimhood or victimization, as though there's no good going on in the world. There's always just as much good going on in the world as there is bad. Because a lot of y'all just looking for it all to be good. That wouldn't be all. That wouldn't be Ma'at. If there was no bad, you wouldn't be able to recognize what's good. So what has our response been to the victimization? In our helplessness, we've resorted to criticizing, condemning, and complaining about one another, about who's inconveniencing themselves enough for the people, who's not endangering themselves enough for the people. And so we resorted to almost a form of trolling. But I want to say this much. The atmosphere that's going on now cosmically with the retrograde of the planet and the high emotions and the justified anger, I'll say this. We are poking a beast. There's a certain consciousness or a demonic consciousness, so you say, that's governing this country. And it's been this way for several hundreds of years. So it's a demonic consciousness that's given birth to offspring, and that offspring are those in high places inside the power structure. So some of the descendants of that offspring of that evil, it is not under the sway of that evil as much. That's why we're talking about things like the job. So now some white people are like, damn, this is messed up. They're not as tapped into that source as other factions of the power structure. I was just reading an article, I think it was Amazon or something. The employees were offended because I think they got a breakfast of chicken and waffles, and they said it was racist. I was like, okay. So now, but black folks eat chicken. In Plainfield, there's 2 chicken and waffle places right across the street from one another. So is it really racist? So is it racist if they were to give Italians pizza and pasta for lunch? If they would give Indians curry? Because in reality, every Italian restaurant has pizza and pasta for the most part. Every Indian restaurant has curry chicken. So black folks eat chicken and waffles, or we like chicken and waffles. So what's the problem with it? So would it be racist if the white folks gave them cold bagels and coffee? Then they'd be like, oh, this is racist. We don't eat that. And ironically, the decision to give them chicken waffles came from a black person or a melanated person in leadership, because that was their favorite place to eat. Mm-hmm. So the point is, we have to be in all this change and all this conversation about racial sensitivity or insensitivity. We have to make sure we don't become the high chair tyrants. That's why I asked you, with these protests, has it sparked some type of change? Yes, it's sparking dialogue that people have been afraid to have. Dialogue that people have been sweeping under the rug. It's been the 500-pound elephant in the room. Now the elephant is being addressed. So you can't be like, don't address it now. Like, yeah, it's time to address it now. So don't put yourself in a position where when they do something, they, oh, it's too much, or it's not enough, or just being, we have a right to be discontent, but we have to still remember Ma'at in this. So what I'm saying is there's a consciousness that's been governing this world for the past 400 years. So it's loosened the foothold on one faction of their descendants, and the other faction is the one that we're concerned with. So this was really never about Juneteenth or having a day off with benefits and things like this. This still came back down to police brutality. And that's the part of the power structure that's resisting the change and resisting the conversation. So we're poking a bear. So my thing is like, be sure that you want all that smoke, because this beast is no joke. Their response to the protest is hanging people. I think there's been several hangings since then. Six or seven. It's almost like that's their ritualistic response. They're leaving nooses around also. I'm here reading articles about nooses are being left in public places and stuff. The police themselves are protesting being checked, which is the story about the police are protesting being disciplined about how rough they've been on black folks.
Yeah.
Some police are not even showing up and work because they want free reign to treat us the way that it is that they want to treat us, and they don't want nobody saying anything about it. Yep. And here we are in this age of social media when you're seeing they've been unjustified in their actions and how they've been treating our people, and they have the attitude to be upset about checks and balances. So what I'm saying, we're poking a bear. Just because you protest peacefully doesn't mean they're going to respond peacefully, because that's an old spirit that's going on, and they're letting you know that level of race, that old school level of racism is still present. So we have to be careful on those fronts. We have to be careful because the attacks won't come at the protest. The protest is the ritual. The protest is the nice version of addressing the ugliness that's going on now. So the real war comes after the protest. Do y'all know that they might be doing facial recognition to all of the people that's out there at the protest? Those people that got hung wasn't people that was pulled from the protest and hung right up in front of the people. Those people were on their way home, minding their own business. So as you leave the ritual of the protest, you still need to be on all cylinders. You still need to be circumspect, because that's when they're doing. They're catching you unaware in that. So I was reading something from the Hosea, from the book of Keti. And it struck me as interesting. Book of Keti. If you got the Hosea, they have quotes from Keti. It's on page 52, midway in the paragraph. It's talking about the creator, the nature, the divine force, and its relationship to humans. Watch this. He makes daylight for their sakes, and he sails around in his sacred bark so that he can see them. We're talking metaphor of the movements of the sun. He has built his shrine around them, and when they weep, he hears. He made for them rulers, nasuts, even from the egg. I know some people believe that leaders aren't born, leaders have to be made, but this text contradicts it. The text says leaders or rulers from the egg, so this is where astrotheology comes from. Leaders to lift the load from the back of the weak. But yet, in our communities, we speak against leadership. And then when crises come, you asking, where's the leadership? Anyway, that's not the point I want to make. Leaders to lift the load from the back of the weak. He made for them hekau. He made for them hekau, words of power, as weapons to ward off the blows of evil events. So hekau, they say, is words of power. I say spiritual authority. He made for them spiritual authority, or he's bestowed upon them spiritual authority as weapons to ward off the blow of evil events. Would you say these things that's going on in our community qualify as evil events?
Absolutely.
I think so too. Guarding them by day and by night. He has slain the traitors amongst them, and as a man strikes his son for the sake of his brother, for nature knows every name. Where am I going with this? I'm comparing this to the documentary 1804 with the Haitian Revolution. Everyone agrees pretty much in our community that voodoo was the cause of the success of the Haitian Revolution. I know some of our scholars say it wasn't voodoo, it was technology, because they were using guns. Yes, they were using guns, and yes, they were fighting, but it still was voodoo that they were using to win that revolution. Why do I say this? If you remember, if you watched the documentary, you notice that the Haitians did not protest. And in contrast to what we're doing now. They continued to go to work. The so-called slave masters was unaware. They continued to go to work. They met at inconvenient times for everyone. They met in inconvenient terrain at weird times of the night. That's when they discussed strategy, plan, warfare. But after libations and offerings were given to the ancestors and the deities, and consulting the deities to how they were to proceed. Because there's something different, something, I want to say supernatural, when a person moves and they feel like they're totally supported by their ancestors and their deities. United States know what that's about. That's why they're slow in their approach to Muslims. They know what we're talking about. That's why they're slow in their approach to Jews. But when it comes to African Americans, we tend not to be connected with our source. We tend to plead to the mercy of our oppressors, hoping that they'd be like, "Are you not tired yet? Can't you lighten up on us?" Instead of seizing your power, seizing your authority. So in those meetings, they decided what was the key phrases or what was the ritualistic gestures that would take place, that they could communicate amongst themselves when it would be time to move. And everybody knew these codes, and when they saw those codes, that's when it happened, and the so-called slave master was unaware when that came down. So now, and let's contrast that to what's going on now. So here we have two nations of Kemet and another African nation of Haiti, because those Haitians consider themselves African. They use spirit first to base their strategy on before they move. So now here we are, we go out into the streets, but we go with no strategy.
Right.
So read between the lines on what I'm saying. So we get emotional and we go out there, and then while we out there, we asking what it is we gonna do, or what is it that we want. All of that was supposed to be planned already, and they should have never saw it coming in the first place. All I'm saying as a spiritualist, when I look at Kemet and when I look at Haiti, I know what role I play in that metaphor, in that scenario. Do you? So when we look at what's going on now, like I said, we got to run on all cylinders. I respect what's going on out there, but are we really ready? To quote the great KRS-One, he said, "Real bad boys move in silence."
Yeah.
So that's what I want to say about that. I want to move on into the health section because it's still connected. So we're going to deal with health. So
before you move into that though, I want to there was two things. One, I want to read these comment real quick. From Ready Set Build Expressions, don't let your enemy know your playbook. Modern example is how the TikTok and K-pop crowd debunked the Trump rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma by doing mass registrations and not showing up. He ended up speaking to an empty room yesterday.
We did the 50 Cent.
Yes. Yep.
50 Cent did that to Ja Rule.
And Queen Medina said, it wasn't just them. Lots of my Facebook friends signed up too. I signed up too.
Wow.
And said I was going to the Trump rally. I didn't go to the Trump rally. Wow. So he was going around saying he had 1 million people that were supposed to show up. And it was something like 6,000 people only showed up. And they didn't even have enough people to show up to fill the whole stadium. The stadium was supposed to hold 20,000 people. He only had 6,000 people showed up. So the stadium was more than half empty. So that was a combination of, the fact that people registered and didn't show. And then also some people, probably some of his people, didn't register to come out because of their fears about the coronavirus. Because that's still a thing that's still happening.
Sure.
The other thing that I was thinking while you were speaking real quick, I was just reading, y'all know I'm preparing for our Sekhmet workshop. We got the Net to Relationships workshop on Sekhmet coming up in a few weeks. So I was reading this morning about this explosion of Sekhmet popularity that was happening in the 18th and 19th dynasty, which was after an intermediary period. Mm-hmm. And these Nasibidi, used the power of Sekhmet and invoked the power of Sekhmet and invoked the power of the Netru to help them to rise up against the invaders. Mm-hmm. And then in order to demonstrate not only that they deserve to continue ruling, but also to put fear in the hearts of their enemies, to keep them enemies from not coming back into the country. Mm-hmm. They put up like 900, 1,000 Sekhmet statues. Everywhere you turn, there was a Sekhmet statue. Like, don't come up in here unless you want that smoke, right? So as you was talking about that, it just reminded me of that example that we see in our ancestral culture about how it is that we use our spiritual powers to our benefit to keep them forces of evil at bay. Go ahead.
So on that same note, but on the elevated note, we want to deal with health. So we're not going to talk about the COVID this time. We're going to talk about black health.
Too.
Or the sort of product. You got those two products over there?
That one.
So we're going to deal with magnesium. So according to the CDC, they say that 85% of all diseases are caused by stress. I repeat this, according to the CDC, all 85% of all diseases are caused by stress. So what is stress? Stress is an emotional response to a situation. So emotional responses to situations compromise the immunity, which then makes you susceptible to what's known as disease. So that means that only 15% of what we know to be diseases are real. The rest of the 85% are figments of our imagination. The rest of the 85% represents diseases of the mind. So when we look at the word disease, it means not at ease. So disease of the mind means when the mind is not at ease. So when the mind is not at ease, you have poor emotional responses to life. Mm-hmm. So now that goes back to what we was talking about at the beginning of the quarantine, which is hashtag mind your mind. Hashtag the universe is mental. Hashtag all is consciousness. 15% of the known diseases can be treated through dietary, herbal, medicinal, or surgical supplementation. What's interesting is that people abdicate the power of their 85% to the 15%. In the law of averages, anything over 50% is considered the majority. So if the newscaster or the weathercaster says it's an 85% chance of rain today, and intuitively you'd be like, it's raining. So there's like 15% chance, and sometimes it do 15% chance and it don't rain, but 85% you like, it's pretty much going down. So what's interesting is that it's rare to see individuals affirm their 85% when it comes to addressing disease. Everyone, as soon as they hear about any type of disease, they automatically go to the herbs, automatically consider medicine, automatically consider diet, automatically consider surgery. What the 85% is telling us is low key is that we're all miracle workers. Mm-hmm. And we're underusing or misusing our mind.
Yeah.
Poor emotional responses equals stress. Stress equals compromised immunity. Compromised immunity equals disease. Disease equals poor performance in life. So in the light of all of that, I'm saying black folks is too stressed. We need to learn to calm down. And I know it's easier said than done, but maybe the stress that you're experiencing might be the result of poor nutrition. The stress that you thinking is so justified might means that you're just severely nutritionally depleted. So we have to learn to calm down. And some people are like, I don't want to calm down. We running on all cylinders. We need to be hyped up. When I say calm down, I'm talking about a calm centeredness so that you can see things clearly in order to make proper decisions. That's the type of calm I'm talking about. Not calm down and let things slide. Calm things down so you know that you're addressing something properly when it's time to address it. So ultimately, I'm talking about circumspection. So I'm talking about insight. I'm talking about foresight. I'm talking about hindsight, all simultaneously. Now, magnesium, what we're supposed to be talking about. Magnesium is responsible for over 300 enzymatic processes in the body. That's a lot. So it's safe to say magnesium makes things work better. If magnesium makes things work better and is responsible for over 300 processes in the body, that means if you're low in magnesium, you're not operating properly.
Right.
2 of the symptoms of low magnesium is muscle twitching and muscle cramps. And one significant one to me is that mental problems, mental issues, psychological issues. How many times in our community when we're speaking amongst one another and You hear about people having issues with the other, and everybody's quick to say she crazy, he crazy. Maybe we talking about a magnesium deficiency. So when you're feeling off, when you're feeling off center, something mentally off, you're not feeling mentally sharp enough, your memory's not right, you might be suffering from a deficiency in magnesium. So some of the things magnesium addresses is inflammation. So the metaphysics behind inflammation is that means you're mentally agitated, you're mentally oversensitive. So magnesium would address that physically as well as psychologically. Magnesium is said to support preventing or lowering the chances of diabetes. So diabetes metaphysically is the inability to enjoy healthy expressions of pleasure on the physical plane. So people are addicted to false forms of sugar instead of true sugar, which is coming from fruits and your vegetables. So they go to the fructose. High blood pressure is said to undermine or support a healthy body that prevents high blood pressure. High blood pressure represents quiet dissatisfaction. Rage turned inward. So you could just be angry and mad and thinking nobody understands, so you just keep it to yourself. So literally you're boiling. Energetically you're boiling. So your blood pressure is up. Unaware to unknown to yourself. It prevents obesity. Obesity represents an unhealthy perspective of self. If you're feeling unseen, if you're feeling understood, misunderstood, if you feel like no one sees you, so it's an unhealthy expression of loneliness. So you literally build up walls of fat around your body that separates you from the environment because you want to be padded from all this hurt and pain that you perceive is coming from other people. So if you want to look for the foods for magnesium, the highest is bananas, cantaloupes, grapefruits, and kiwi. But that's not therapeutic. That's maintenance. When the minerals and things you get from food is maintenance, you can't eat enough bananas that have a therapeutic effect. You wind up getting fat with all the sugar and stuff like that. So there's a product called Natural Calm that you could take. I think it's backwards on this screen, right?
It'll show up
by a company called Natural Vitality. It's a powdered form of magnesium, 350 milligrams. So you would take 3 teaspoons or when you take 2 teaspoons.
The recommended dose is 2 teaspoons before bed.
2 teaspoons in water before bed. Or you could do 3 teaspoons and 1 teaspoon of baking soda in a basin or a bucket of water and put your feet in it. In warm water and put your feet in it. And that relaxes the body. Or you could put it a few scoops inside your bath water as a form of a spiritual bath. Also, you could look into ZMA. ZMA is zinc and magnesium. As we know, zinc is connected to supporting the immune function that stops viruses from replicating, but it also stimulates the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland is responsible for metabolism and energy production. So here you have magnesium that'll reduce inflammation, and now you have the zinc, the thyroid acting to produce energy. And also in those combinations with the ZMA, you'll see vitamin B6 called peroxidine. Vitamin B6 builds red blood cells, and also it builds neurotransmitters. That's nerve transmission. So it increases the body-mind connection, the way the brain communicates with the body. And also red blood cells are oxygenated blood cells. So with vitamin B6, it stimulates a blood flow to and from the brain. So ultimately you're talking about with ZMA, you're talking about a brain detox. So you can take that before you go to bed. It'll help you sleep. And it takes you to what I call the theta states of sleep. And that's the state of sleep where you actually heal. And that's what we're talking about. When you go to sleep, you need to be so much into your relaxation state that your body's allowed to heal.
Right.
Some people they barely sleep when they're sleeping. Some people take like 2 to 3 or 4 hours just to fall asleep, just to have to wake up 2 hours later. So people are not properly resting. So people are acting like they acting all colicky and whiny and stuff, and it's really probably because you're not resting well. So now, ZMA, for those that's doing ancestral work, I suggest that you get ZMA because it takes you into the theta states of sleep. So if you're doing heavy ancestral work or work with the deities and you're requesting you're requesting responses to queries to them, then this is usually with ancestors and spirit, their first form and way that they tend to communicate with you is through your dreams. So you got to learn how to relax enough to actually really sleep so you could go into the dream world and commune with your ancestors. So that's just a tidbit for that. It'll help you with successfully. It may help support you with successfully communicating with your ancestors. That's it for the help section.
Do on that, sir. Occur. That means excellent. Yes. Yes, I definitely highly recommend Natural Calm. That's something that I take on a pretty regular basis. And my favorite quote from the Hosea comes from Pahebhor. And he says, if the wise are not calm, their manner is not perfect. Mm-hmm. If there is no calm between battles, the army gets no rest. Mm-hmm. If there is no calm between feasts, the master and the mistress of the house cannot enjoy themselves. And if there is no calm in the temple, the netter abandons it. So for me, that's a personal charge all the time to remember. Like I'm a double Capricorn, so work is like my thing. Mm-hmm. So those words from Pahebhor remind me to cultivate calm and remind me that calm is just as important as achievement, right? Mm-hmm. And remind me to value calm as much as I value achievement. So I do take Natural Calm regularly in my efforts to support that in my life. It helped me sleep better. So I can give a personal testimony to how good it is. So I strongly encourage you guys to try it out. Let me see. I see you can also not be deficient on paper and still need it. If the nervous system is responding off center, magnesium can bring it back to center.
Who said that?
Ready, set, build expressions.
That's right.
Yeah. Duh. And I also get immediate mental clarity, which includes seeing clearer. Dua for that. Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, I think people think that, well, I guess, like, medical doctors might have a different measurement of what deficient is than what, like, if you go to a naturopathic healer, you know, especially because, like, we as African people probably need things a little differently than, like, white people or Asians or whatever. Yeah. Like, so you might go to the doctor and they take your blood and they test and they be like, oh, you fine. And you like, but I don't feel fine. And then you go to your naturopath and they like, you need more vitamin D, you need like this, you need that. And it's because we as African people might have different needs, or like Nasit was saying at the beginning, because we as African people have different stressors in our lives. Like, you know, just like going on Facebook and seeing another black man shot, another black person hung from a tree, another black person arrested by the police, another this, another that, like the levels of stress, the post-traumatic slave syndrome, you know, those things is different for us that other people don't experience or feel. And so yeah, the doctor might tell you that you're good, but that doesn't mean you're good. So again, as we always do with our health advice, we always encourage you to work with a naturopathic healer to help to determine what you need specifically based on your individual health profile. Definitely. So, okay. I think so. I think that was all right. So you know, we got Dua again, righteous and respectful chat for joining us today. I want to ask you guys to make a donation if you feel so inclined. You can do so on Cash App, which is $Temple of Anu, or on PayPal, which is templeofanu@gmail.com. I'll thank you guys in advance for sending your donations in reciprocity of the energy that we've given to you guys today. And for anyone who is not able to give a donation today, as always, that's cool. We will still be back here next Sunday at 1 p.m. for our regularly scheduled communion. And we just greatly appreciate you guys.
One last shout out for the First Down Kemet.
One last shout out for First Down Kemet. Again, we are starting on July 3rd. That is a fixed date for the start of the class. So anyone who would like to register needs to register before the start of classes, okay? So you got a little bit of time to get in there. Send us a private message on Facebook or an email to let us know if you're interested or if you have questions and things like that that you want to discuss. We're available to you to discuss and to answer your questions. So we'll see you guys again right here next Sunday for our regularly scheduled communion, which takes a little bit of a different format. We do a little bit less interaction with the chat. And it starts earlier in the day. It starts at 1 p.m. But otherwise, we'll be here every Sunday as we've been through the duration of this quarantine. And I know that things are starting to open up for us here in New Jersey. We are starting to put together plans to get back together in person for our communion. And as we have those plans solidified, we will communicate with you guys. And we look forward to seeing you guys in person real soon. But in the meantime, we'll be back here online every Sunday. Next week, we'll be here at 1 p.m. And dua again for your energy and for your time, for your presence, for your comments, for your donations, and for your energy. All right? Show me Matef, everybody.
What's up?